Paula Cooper was born in 1969 in Gary, Indiana. She and her older sister Rhonda grew up in a home filled with hardship. Their mother, Gloria, struggled with drinking and her mental health. Their father, Herman, was often away because of work and personal problems. Paula and Rhonda went into foster care several times, but kept returning to their parents. The cycle of neglect and mistreatment continued. On May 14, 1985, Paula was 15 years old. She and 3 friends spent the day skipping school, drinking and smoking. That evening, they planned to take money from 78-year-old Ruth Pelka's home. Ruth taught Bible lessons in Gary. The teens said they wanted to learn more about the Bible to enter the house. Once inside, one of the girls hit Ruth with a vase. Paula then struck Ruth 33 times with a 12-inch butcher object. Afterward, they took $10 in Ruth's car and then ran away. Their goal was to get money. Paula later called it a theft that went wrong. She said they did not mean to cause such harm, but they had carried out other thefts before. Having Ruth in her home turned their plan into a fatal incident. Paula's trial began in 1986. She was found guilty of taking a life. Because she was under 16, people across the country paid attention. On July 11, 1986, a judge gave Paula capital punishment. She became the youngest woman in the U.S. to receive that punishment. The case sparked a strong reaction. Human rights groups and even Pope John Paul II asked for mercy. 2 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that anyone under 16 at the time of their act could not receive that punishment. Indiana updated its rules to match that decision. Paula's sentence was changed to 60 years in prison. She served about 28 years and earned a bachelor's degree while inside. On June 17, 2013, she was released. After her release, Paula tried to build a new life. She said she regretted her actions and wanted to help others avoid the same mistakes. Then, on May 26, 2015, at age 45, Paula passed away in what appeared to be a self-inflicted incident. Her life ended after a long and difficult journey. The next case started with jealousy and ended in something far worse. Christa Pike was born in 1976 in Beckley, West Virginia. She grew up in an unstable home. Her parents married and divorced twice. Their household was often chaotic. She faced neglect and mistreatment at times. When her grandmother passed away, Christa was deeply hurt. At age 12, she tried to take her own life. In her teens, Christa's behavior grew more unpredictable. She was harmed by others and also harmed people herself. Her grades fell, and she moved between schools often. She later joined the Job Corps program in Knoxville, Tennessee. She hoped to learn job skills and find stability. On January 12, 1995, 18-year-old Christa Pike, her partner Tadderel Shipp, and their friend Shadala Peterson lured fellow trainee Colleen Slemmer to an abandoned steam plant near the University of Tennessee. They said they wanted to make peace and offered her a joint. The meeting turned rough. Christa and Tadderel taunted Colleen and hit her for about 30 minutes. They carved a pentagram into her chest. Then they used a chunk of asphalt to crush her skull, ending her life. Christa kept a small fragment as a souvenir. Why did this happen? Christa believed Colleen wanted Tadderel. She felt jealous. Her mental state was unstable. She was drawn to occult ideas. These factors led her to plan the moment in advance. Within 36 hours of that fatal incident, Christa, Tadderel, and Shadola were taken into custody. Christa had been showing the skull fragment at the Job Corps Center, which made others suspicious. During questioning, she admitted what happened. She said they only meant to scare Colleen, but things got out of hand. At trial, authorities presented her confession and other proof. On March 22, 1996, the court found her guilty of first-degree homicide and of plotting a homicide. 8 days later, the court ordered capital punishment by electrocution for the first homicide. She also received a 25-year prison term for the planning charge. Tatterall Shipp was given life behind bars, with a chance for parole after 25 years. Shadola Peterson, who cooperated with investigators, got probation. Christa has been held at the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center in Nashville since her conviction. For almost 30 years, she stayed mostly alone because she was the only woman awaiting the chair. In 2024, a court order ended her isolation. She now has more interaction with others and can work inside the prison. Has Christa shown aggressive behavior behind bars? Yes. In 2001, she tried to take the life of a fellow inmate, Patricia Jones, using a shoelace. In 2004, the court found her guilty of attempted first-degree homicide for that act. Christa's lawyers have filed many appeals. They point to her age and mental health at the time. In 2022, they cited a Tennessee Supreme Court decision that stresses age matters in sentencing. But her sentence remains in place. But how does a group turn a simple invitation into a living nightmare? Tiffany Cole was born in 1981 in South Carolina. She grew up in a troubled home. She faced mistreatment and often lacked care. Her father had been friends with Reggie and Carol Sumner. The Sumners once lived next door. That connection would become important later. In July 2005, Cole teamed up with her boyfriend Michael Jackson and two others, Alan Wade and Bruce Nixon, to target the Sumners for money. The group knew the couple had moved to Jacksonville, Florida. They believed the Sumners had some cash. The four drove to Jacksonville. They said they needed to use the phone and got invited inside. Once inside, they tied up the couple and gagged them. They forced the Sumners to give up their ATM code. Then they placed the couple in the trunk of their car and drove north to a quiet spot in Georgia. Days earlier, someone had dug a deep hole there. The group put the Sumners into that hole and covered them with soil while they were still alive. Why did they use that method instead of a quicker way? They likely wanted to avoid a direct act that stops life right away. But this choice meant the Sumners suffered longer before they passed. Police traced ATM withdrawals back to the group and arrested them in Charleston, South Carolina. At the trial, prosecutors said Cole fully joined in. They noted she rented the car used to take the Sumners away. She was there during both the planning and carrying out of the act. Some asked if she was the main planner. Michael Jackson led the scheme, but Cole's role was key. She did more than help. She took part in the events that ended the Sumners' lives. In 2007, a jury found Cole guilty on 2 counts of first-degree unaliving, taking them against their will, and theft. She received the highest penalty available at the time and became one of the youngest women in the U.S. to face that outcome. In 2017, her penalty was reduced because Florida law then required a unanimous jury for the maximum sentence. In 2023, at her new sentencing, a jury voted 10-2 for her to remain locked up for life without any chance of release. They pointed to her difficult childhood and her efforts to improve while incarcerated when explaining their decision. Tiffany and her accomplices chose a method meant to prolong suffering. Yet, could there be an incident even harder to explain? The next woman's actions toward her children defy belief. Stay tuned. Christina Marie Riggs was born on September 2, 1971, in Lawton, Oklahoma. Her childhood had dark moments. She said both a stepbrother and a neighbor inappropriately touched her. By age 14, she was drinking and smoking a lot. At 16, she became pregnant and gave the child up for adoption. After high school, she trained to be a licensed practical nurse and worked in home health care, and then at a Veterans Administration hospital. In 1991, Christina became pregnant again. Her son was named Justin Dalton Thomas. His father, Timothy Thompson, denied paternity and moved to Minnesota. Before Justin's birth in June 1992, Christina reconnected with a man she'd known before, John Riggs. They married in July 1993. In December 1994, they welcomed a daughter, Shelby Alexis Riggs. The family moved to Sherwood, Arkansas in 1995. Later that year, John struck Justin and injured him. Christina and John divorced soon after. On November 4, 1997, a tragedy unfolded in their Sherwood home. Christina took Elavil, amitriptyline, from her hospital and potassium chloride from her workplace. She planned to give both medicines to her children so they would fall asleep, then use the chemical on them. She first gave both children Elavil. Next, she injected Justin with potassium chloride. He woke up crying in pain. She then gave him morphine. When that did not ease his pain, she covered his face with a pillow until he stopped moving. She then used a pillow on Shelby without using the chemical on her. Afterward, Christina wrote notes saying she wanted to end her own life. She swallowed 28 Elavil pills and injected herself with undiluted potassium chloride. The injection burned her arm but did not enter her bloodstream. The pills knocked her out but did not take her life. The next day, her mother found her and the children. On November 6, 1997, authorities arrested Christina. She faced 2 charges for taking her children's lives. At her trial in June 1998, her defense said she was not responsible for her actions, citing severe depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. The prosecution said she acted out of hatred and saw her children as a burden. The jury took less than an hour to find her fully responsible. During sentencing, Christina chose not to share more reasons. She asked for the state's highest penalty, saying, "I want to die. I want to be with my babies." On June 30, 1998, the court imposed that penalty. On May 2, 2000, at the Cummins unit in Arkansas, the state carried out its sentence using a chemical procedure. Christina was the first woman in Arkansas to have this sentence since 1845 and the 5th in the United States since its return in 1976. Before officials carried out the procedure, she spoke to them. "No words can express just how sorry I am for ending my children's lives. No way I can make up for or take away the pain I have caused everyone who knew and loved them." Her last words were, "I love you, my babies." But the next mother? Oh, her motive was even more shocking. Frances Elaine Newton was born on April 12, 1965, in Harris County, Texas. She married Adrian Newton. They had 2 children, Alton, who was 7, and Farah, who was 21 months old. In December 1985, Frances was convicted of forging a document. She received 3 years of probation for that offense. On April 7, 1987, Adrian, Alton, and Farah were found with gunshot wounds in their Houston apartment. All 3 lost their lives. Investigators traced the handgun to a man Frances was seeing at the time. Frances said an illegal substance dealer, someone Adrian owed money to, was behind what happened. About a month before this incident, she did something very suspicious. But before we move on to the details, consider liking and subscribing for more stories like this. What did she do? Frances bought 3 life insurance policies worth $50,000 each. One for Adrian, one for Farah, and one for herself. She named herself as the beneficiary for Adrian's and Farah's policies. Later, she admitted she had signed Adrian's name on his policy without telling him. Prosecutors argued that she wanted to collect on those policies. Soon after the shootings, Frances took the handgun, put it in a paper bag, and hid it at a relative's home. Frances was arrested and charged in connection with the fatal shootings of her husband and children. On October 25, 1988, a jury found her guilty, and she was given a sentence of capital punishment. Throughout her trial and appeals, she insisted she had no part in the shootings and blamed the dealer. Frances spent nearly 17 years on row. During that time, many people questioned the strength of the evidence and the quality of her legal help. On December 1st, 2004, just 2 hours before she was to face her punishment, Governor Rick Perry granted her a 120-day delay so that more forensic tests could be done. Later, appeals failed, and her sentence was rescheduled. On September 14, 2005, Frances Newton's sentence was carried out at the Huntsville unit in Texas. She chose not to make a final statement and did not ask for a last meal. She was the third woman to face this penalty in Texas since 1982, and the first black woman in the state to face it since the Civil War. But what if the warning signs were always there, just ignored? Lisa was born in 1975. She had some run-ins with the law before. She served 5 years for possession with intent to sell illegal substances. She had a son of her own. She was in a relationship with Marcella Williams, Devontae's mother. They shared an apartment in Arlington, Texas. That is where the mistreatment happened. Devontae was born prematurely in June 1995 and had developmental disabilities. Child Protective Services, CPS, had investigated the household multiple times due to allegations of neglect and mistreatment. In 1999, Devontae and his sister were removed from the home after alarming signs, including thinning hair and bruises. They were returned to Marcella a year later under the condition that she would keep Coleman away from the children. In July 2004, first responders found Devontae's body in the apartment. He was 9 years old. He weighed only 36 pounds, about half the expected weight for a child his age. His body showed over 250 injuries. He had burns and scars that pointed to ongoing neglect. He passed from a lack of nutrition and pneumonia. No one knows for sure why Lisa and Marcella treated Devontae this way. Some reports say they struggled with parenting. They may have felt overwhelmed by his behavior. Even so, the extent of the harm suggests they meant to cause damage. Officials investigated and brought charges against both women. In June 2006, a jury found Lisa guilty. She received the harshest sentence available. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals agreed to keep the verdict in place, saying the evidence was enough. She was the 15th woman in the United States to face this punishment since 1976. Her case drew national attention. Marcella chose a plea deal. She is serving a life sentence. After all her appeals were exhausted, the state carried out the medical procedure on September 17, 2014, at the Huntsville unit in Texas. Lisa's final words were for her family. "I just want to tell my family I love them. My son, I love him. God is good. I'm done." 12 minutes later, her life came to an end. The next story is not an easy one, but it demands to be told. Kelly Renee Brookshire was born on March 8, 1968, in Lawrenceville, Georgia. She grew up in a poor cotton farming family. Her early years were very hard. During her childhood and teen years, her stepfather and other men harmed her in a way she could not agree to. In her senior year of high school, she said someone forced her into an intimate act. 9 months later, she had her first son. At 19, Kelly married Jeff Banks. That marriage ended after 6 months. In 1989, she married Douglas Gissendaner. They had a child together. Money became tight, and they moved in with Kelly's mother. Douglas joined the army, and they lived in Germany for a while. While there, Kelly became pregnant by another man, who later passed away from cancer. Kelly and Douglas divorced in 1993, then remarried 2 years later. By December 1996, they had bought a house in Auburn, Georgia. On February 7, 1997, Kelly planned to end Douglas's life. She asked her boyfriend, Gregory Owen, to carry out her plan. Owen hid near their home in Auburn. When Douglas arrived, Owen forced him into his car. They drove to a wooded area in Gwinnett County. There, Owen hit Douglas with a stick and struck him several times in the neck and back with a sharp object. Kelly arrived soon after. Together, they set fire to Douglas's car and left his body in the woods. Kelly's goal was to remove Douglas while still collecting his life insurance money and keeping their house. Douglas's body was found nearly 2 weeks later. Investigators examined phone records and saw that Kelly had called Owen 47 times and sent him 18 pages in the days before Douglas passed. Both were arrested on February 25, 1997. Before the trial, prosecutors offered both of them a deal: life in prison with a chance of release after 25 years. Owen accepted it and agreed to speak against Kelly. He said she had first asked him about a way to get rid of Douglas 3 months earlier. Kelly rejected the offer. At trial, it came out that Kelly had tried to scare witnesses and even tried to pay someone to lie in court. On November 18, 1998, she was found guilty of planning a homicide. The next day, the judge gave her a sentence calling for her life to end. Many people argued whether that punishment matched Kelly's role. Owen, who carried out the plan, got a life sentence and could be released later. Kelly, who organized everything, received a sentence that called for her life to end. In prison, Kelly underwent a change of faith. She began helping other people there. She enrolled in a theology course and formed a friendship with the theologian Jürgen Moltmann. Her work guiding and supporting fellow inmates earned her respect. The date set for carrying out her sentence was February 25, 2015. It was delayed because of problems with the injection medication. Many people, including Pope Francis, asked for her to be spared, but the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles said no. On September 30, 2015, her sentence was carried out by a medical injection at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison. She was the first woman in Georgia to face this punishment in 70 years. Kelly's final words were simple: "I just want to say God bless you all, and I love you, Susan. You let my kids know I went out singing Amazing Grace." For her last meal, she asked for 2 cheeseburgers, 2 large orders of French fries, cornbread, buttermilk, cherry vanilla ice cream, popcorn, and a salad with boiled eggs, tomatoes, bell peppers, onions, carrots, cheese, and buttermilk dressing. In the next case, a low IQ score raised doubts about guilt and punishment. But it was already too late. Teresa Wilson was born on April 26, 1969, in Danville, Virginia. She grew up in a blue-collar family. Both of her parents worked at a textile mill. When she was young, she sang in church. At 16, she left school and married a man she had met at that church. They had a daughter, Christy Lynn Bean. The marriage ended soon after. Teresa then began drinking and using pain pills. Her mother-in-law, Marie Bean, said Teresa was not right. Over the years, Teresa held many low-paying jobs. In spring 2000, she took a job at the Dan River Textile Mill. Her supervisor there was Julian Clifton Lewis, Jr. He was a recent widower with 3 children, Jason, Charles, and Kathy. In June 2000, Teresa and her teenage daughter moved into Julian's home. Soon after, Teresa and Julian married. In December 2001, Jason lost his life in a car accident. The family received $200,000 from a life insurance plan. Julian used that money to buy a manufactured home on 5 acres in Pittsylvania County, Virginia. By August 2002, Charles was preparing to deploy to Iraq with the Army Reserve. He took out a $250,000 life insurance plan. He named his father first and Teresa second as the people who would get the money if he passed. On October 30, 2002, Teresa left her house door unlocked. 2 men, Matthew Schallenberger and Rodney Fuller, walked in. They shot Julian and Charles while they slept. The goal was to collect the $250,000 insurance payout. Teresa had met Schallenberger at Walmart. They began an intimate relationship. She promised both men money and closeness if they carried out the plan. Police arrested Teresa soon after the shootings. She admitted her role. She pleaded guilty to the most serious charge of causing two people to lose their lives for money. Schallenberger and Fuller each received sentences that keep them in prison for life. Teresa's IQ was measured at 72, just above the cutoff for intellectual disability. That score raised doubts about her ability to understand what was happening. It also led to debates over applying the harshest sentence. All appeals failed. On September 23, 2010, at Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia, the state carried out her sentence. She was the first woman in Virginia to face that outcome since 1912. For her final meal, Teresa ate 2 fried chicken breasts, sweet peas with butter, a Dr. Pepper, and chose either German cake or apple pie for dessert. Her last words were, "I'm very sorry." The next victim never came home that night. What followed made U.S. legal history. On January 3, 2023, the state carried out Amber McLofflin's sentence at the Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Bonne Terre, Missouri. She was 49 years old. In 2006, a court had found her guilty of causing the passing of her ex-girlfriend, Beverly Gwenther, in late 2003. That marked the first time in U.S. history that the state's highest penalty was applied to an openly transgender person. Amber was born Scott Anthony McLofflin on January 13, 1973, in Missouri. She was adopted as an infant. Her adoptive father sometimes hit her. She struggled with her gender identity throughout her childhood. In her early 40s, she began to live as her true self. The process was difficult and brought many painful moments. In November 2003, her relationship with Beverly ended. Beverly secured a court order to keep Amber away. Amber kept sending threatening messages and turn up at Beverly's workplace. At one point, she even hid inside the building. On November 20, 2003, Beverly did not come home. Neighbors grew concerned and called the police. Officers later found her body near the Mississippi River in St. Louis. At trial, Amber was found guilty of first-degree homicide, a forced intimate act, and an armed wrongdoing. Her trial took place in 2006. The jury could not agree on whether to apply the state's highest penalty. In many places, a split jury would mean a life term. Missouri law lets a judge decide if the jury is tied. The judge reviewed additional factors and imposed the state's highest penalty. On the day of her sentence, Amber was accompanied by a spiritual advisor. At 6:39 p.m., she received her dose of pentobarbital. Her last words were, "I am sorry for what I did. I am a loving and caring person." For her final meal, she requested a cheeseburger, French fries, a strawberry milkshake, and peanut M&Ms. Her case prompted many conversations about the penalty system, mental health care, and how transgender people are treated in prison. Supporters asked for mercy, pointing to her troubled childhood and mental health struggles. They noted that no expert witnesses spoke on her behalf at trial. Some Missouri lawmakers also appealed for mercy. In the end, though, the sentence was carried out as planned. What happens when someone finds their truth too late? Carla Fa Tucker was born in 1959 in Houston, Texas. She was the youngest of 3 sisters. Her father, Larry, worked as a longshoreman. Her mother, Carolyn, traveled with rock bands. The home was unstable. There were divorces and a lot of emotional pain. When Tucker was 10, her parents separated. She then learned she was born from an affair. That shook her sense of self and made her early teen years even harder. By age 12, she was using illegal substances. At 14, she left school. She then followed her mother into adult entertainment, traveling with bands like the Allman Brothers Band, the Marshall Tucker Band, and the Eagles. When she was 16, she married a handyman named Stephen Griffith. They soon went their separate ways. In her early 20s, she joined a biker group. There, she met Sean Dean and his husband, Jerry Lynn Dean. Those connections led to a shocking incident. On June 13, 1983, at about 3 a.m., Tucker and her boyfriend, Daniel Ryan Garrett, went to Jerry Lynn Dean's apartment to take a motorcycle he was fixing. James Leibrandt waited outside. Inside, Dean confronted Tucker. Garrett struck him in the back of the head with a hammer. Dean began making gurgling sounds as blood came from his mouth. Tucker picked up a 3-foot pickaxe. She drove it into him many times. Garrett then hit Dean's chest one last time. Dean lost his life at that moment. After that, Tucker found Deborah Ruth Thornton in the apartment. Thornton had spent the night there after an argument with her husband. Tucker hit Thornton with the pickaxe again and again. Those blows ended Thornton's life. At the trial, Tucker said she felt intense pleasure with each hit. That statement shocked many people. The next morning, a co-worker found both bodies. Police investigated and arrested Tucker and Garrett 5 weeks later. In September 1983, they were formally charged in connection with the two tragic events. Their cases went to trial separately. Tucker faced charges for both events. She testified against Garrett at his trial, so the charge in Thornton's case was dropped against her. Tucker pleaded not guilty. In 1984, a jury found her responsible and gave her the most serious penalty. Her case drew a lot of attention. She was a woman facing that penalty. She became a born-again Christian while waiting in the section for inmates scheduled for the final procedure. Many religious leaders and politicians asked for leniency. Even the Pope wrote on her behalf. But the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles turned down every appeal. Governor George W. Bush chose not to intervene. Officials carried out that procedure on February 3, 1998. That day, Tucker was moved from the Mountain View unit in Gatesville to the Huntsville unit. She asked for a last meal of a banana, a peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing. She asked 4 people to be with her: her sister Carrie Weeks, her husband Dana Brown, her close friend Jackie Onken, and Ronald Carlson, the brother of one of the victims. Family members of the victims were also present. At 6:37 p.m. CST, she received the final injection. 8 minutes later, at 6:45 p.m., officials said she had passed away. She was buried at Forest Park Lawndale Cemetery in Houston. Before that moment, Tucker spoke directly to the families of Dean and Thornton. She said she was sorry. She asked them to forgive her and to find peace. She also said she hoped they would come to know Jesus Christ as she had. Carla Fa Tucker's brutal acts and later spiritual rebirth captured global attention, but the very next case still leaves one big question hanging. Is the evidence solid enough to end a mother's life? Stay tuned for a story that remains unresolved after more than 2 decades. Darlie Lynn Peck was born in 1970 in Altoona, Pennsylvania. She was the first child of Larry and Darlie Peck. Her home life was stable. At age 15, she moved to Lubbock, Texas, with her mother and stepfather. There, she met Darren Routier. He worked as a cook at the local restaurant where her mother also worked. They married in August 1988. They had 3 sons: Devin, born in 1984, Damon, born in 1985, and Drake, born in 1995. On the night of June 6, 1996, an incident took place at the Routier home. At about 2:31 a.m., Darlie called 911. She said someone had broken into the house and hurt her and her boys. She said Devin and Damon had been targeted and did not survive their injuries. She also said she had cuts on her throat and arm. Investigators found no sign that anyone had forced their way in. Some of the evidence seemed arranged. A bloody sock lay about 75 yards from the house. A wine glass was broken in a way that suggested it had been placed there on purpose. At her trial, the prosecution said Darlie had harmed her sons because of money troubles. They argued she wanted to collect insurance money. They said she staged the scene and cut herself to make her story believable. The defense said there was no clear reason for her to do this. They argued the proof was indirect. In February 1997, a jury found Darlie guilty of a serious charge related to Damon's passing. The judge imposed the most severe penalty, which meant she would receive an injection that would end her life. Darlie has always said she is not to blame. Her lawyers have filed many appeals over the years. They pointed out errors at her trial and highlighted new DNA details. In 2008, a court allowed fresh DNA testing. That work has been delayed many times by legal procedures. As of April 2025, Darlie Routier remains held in a high-security unit. Her case continues to draw attention. Supporters keep asking for a full review of all the evidence. They hope she may get a new trial.